When my wife died, I thought the silence in the house would be the hardest part. But it wasn't. The hardest part was the whispers. Neighbors leaning over fences, lowering their voices whenever I passed. They weren't mourning her. They were gossiping about the locked room upstairs, about what she had hidden from me all these years. 3 days after the funeral, I stood trembling in front of that door. My hand shook so badly I could hardly fit the iron key into the lock. She had forbidden me from ever touching it, had snapped at me once when I even brushed my fingers against the handle. Now the key lay heavy in my palm, burning like a curse. If you want to hear what I uncovered that night, subscribe now, because what I found in that room shattered every belief I had about the woman I loved. The key scraped against the rusted lock, the sound louder than my own breathing. I felt sweat drip down my temples, as though the air itself resisted me. My heart pounded, every beat echoing in the dark hallway. The smell of dust and flowers long dead drifted from under the crack in the door. My knees nearly buckled, but I turned the key anyway. It clicked, a sharp metallic sound that made me flinch like a gunshot. I hesitated, my fingers clenching the brass knob. The silence pressed against me, thicker than walls. For 30 years, I had been a husband in a house filled with rules I thought were harmless. But in that moment, I realized maybe I had been nothing more than a guest in her world. I pushed the door open. A groan of wood filled the hall, stretching like a scream. Dust swirled in the air, glittering in a thin line of moonlight that cut through the small window. The room smelled of mildew, of something locked away too long, like secrets that had rotted over time. My chest tightened. Boxes were stacked against the walls. An old trunk sat in the corner, its lid warped but bound by a rusted padlock. The wallpaper had peeled in strips, revealing stains beneath. I stepped inside, every board creaking under my weight as though warning me to turn back. But I didn't. On the table by the window lay an envelope. My name was written across it in her familiar handwriting, but shakier, almost desperate. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the ink smeared in places as if tears had touched it. My throat closed. I hadn't expected her to leave me anything. I picked it up with trembling fingers. The flap wasn't sealed. She had left it open, like she wanted me to find it. I slid the paper out and unfolded it slowly. Her voice seemed to rise from the words, whispering directly into my ear. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and what I have hidden can no longer stay buried. My stomach twisted. Buried. What had she meant by that? My eyes darted to the trunk in the corner. The padlock looked old, but the scratches around it suggested it had been opened and closed many times before. I suddenly felt I wasn't alone in the room. The letter went on, but the words blurred as my hands shook. I set it down and stepped toward the trunk. My heart raced with every step, a drum beat in my ears. I reached out, running my fingers over the lock. Cold, solid, but not impenetrable. I searched the boxes nearby, my hands rifling through papers, fabric, old photographs with faces I didn't recognize. Men, children. None of them were me. None of them were ours. A chill slid down my spine, as if the ghosts of strangers were staring at me from the faded prints. And then I found it. Another small key tucked inside a wooden box filled with letters bound by ribbon. My breath caught. She had left me the means to open the trunk. My hands went clammy, but I clutched it tight. I walked back to the trunk, each step echoing. I crouched, slipped the key into the padlock, and turned. A metallic snap cut through the stillness, final and merciless. My mouth went dry. I lifted the lid slowly. The hinges squealed in protest, the sound sharp and shrill. My eyes adjusted to the darkness inside. And then I saw them. Stacks of photographs, neatly arranged, faces upon faces, smiling at her, standing beside her, touching her shoulders as though they belonged to her. None of them were familiar. None of them were me. I picked one up, my hand trembling. In it, she stood younger, radiant, holding a baby close to her chest. My breath froze. On the back of the photo, in her handwriting, was a single word: ours. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My throat closed, my vision swam. A child? Ours? But not mine? The letters tied in ribbons spilled out of the trunk, scattering across the floor like confessions she had never spoken. I knelt, fumbling through them, opening one after another. Names, places, references to people I had never met. Years of her life I had never known. A hidden world she had guarded fiercely. My head spun. I staggered back against the wall, the letter still clutched in my hand. My wife of 3 decades, had lived another life. A life that excluded me. A life that had a child marked as ours. The silence of the room became unbearable. My own breathing sounded too loud, too jagged. The shadows seemed to press in, choking me. My pulse thundered in my ears. I heard something then. Not the creak of wood, not the whisper of dust. A sound from downstairs. Faint, steady. The unmistakable ring of the doorbell. My blood froze. At this hour? After all this? My legs felt like stone, but I forced myself upright. The photographs slipped from my grip, scattering at my feet. I took one step toward the hallway when I heard it again. The doorbell, louder this time. Urgent, demanding. Someone was here. With my heart clawing at my ribs, I turned toward the staircase. The letter still burned in my hand. Whoever stood at that door, they were connected to her secret. And when I opened it, I knew my life would never be the same. I froze at the top of the stairs, my hand gripping the railing so tight my knuckles went white. The bell rang again, echoing through the house like a summons I couldn't ignore. My chest heaved as I tried to steady myself, but the letter in my hand felt heavier with every second. Whoever was out there wasn't just a stranger at the door. They were the embodiment of the secret my wife had carried to her grave. The hallway stretched before me, familiar yet alien now that I knew this house had held lies behind every locked door. My bare feet made soft thuds against the wooden steps as I descended, each one vibrating up my legs, amplifying my dread. I passed the family portraits on the wall, smiling faces, milestones, the life we built together, and suddenly all of them felt staged, as if every photograph was another mask she had worn. I reached the front door and hesitated. My breath fogged the glass panel, and through the distorted blur I saw the outline of a figure. Tall, motionless, waiting. My heart hammered so loud I thought they could hear it from the other side. I swallowed hard, feeling the dryness in my throat scrape like sandpaper. I wanted to run, to hide upstairs, and pretend I never heard the bell. But my hand was already moving toward the handle. I pulled the door open, and the cold night air swept in, carrying the smell of rain-soaked earth. Standing there was a man, maybe mid-30s, his hair dark and damp from the drizzle. He had her eyes, the same shade, the same shape, only sharper, framed by a face that was eerily familiar in ways I couldn't place. He looked at me like he had been expecting me, and then, in a voice that was calm but heavy with something unspoken, he said, "You must be him." My mouth opened, but no words came out. I gripped the edge of the door for balance, the world tilting as recognition crawled over me. He didn't smile. His expression was neither hostile nor kind. It was searching, almost pitying. "I'm sorry for coming at this hour," he continued, "but I didn't know who else to face first." My chest constricted, as if invisible hands had wrapped around it. I had lived decades with her, but in this stranger's face, I saw the truth she had hidden. "Who are you?" My voice came out hoarse, barely more than a whisper. He hesitated, his jaw tightening before he answered. "My name is Daniel," he said. "And she was my mother." The words slammed into me, harder than any blow I could have imagined. For a moment, the night air disappeared, and all I could hear was the roaring in my head. My legs trembled, the doorway becoming a cage I couldn't escape. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the letter. My breath came in short gasps, as though the walls had closed in around me. Daniel stepped forward, not aggressively, but with a steady confidence, as though he had rehearsed this moment many times. "I don't want trouble," he added quickly. "I just want to understand why she lived the way she did, why she locked me away in silence all these years." His words stabbed deeper than I expected, because I realized he wasn't only here to confront me, he was also wounded. I shook my head violently, clutching the letter to my chest. This can't be," I muttered. But even as I said it, the photographs upstairs burned in my memory. Her holding a baby. The word "ours" scrawled on the back. My voice cracked as I asked, "Why now? Why after her death?" His gaze softened, though his eyes glistened under the porch light. "Because she left me a letter, too, and it led me here." For a moment, the world seemed to collapse inward. 2 letters, one for me, one for him. She had orchestrated this collision, even from beyond the grave. My knees gave way, and I sank onto the small bench by the door, my head buried in my hands. Daniel didn't move closer. He just stood there, waiting, giving me the space to unravel while he carried his own burden in silence. The rain tapped gently against the porch roof, a cruelly calm soundtrack to the storm inside me. Finally, I forced myself to look at him again. The resemblance was undeniable now. The tilt of his chin, the curve of his brow, even the faint scar near his lip. All shadows of her. All proof. "How old are you?" I asked suddenly, my voice sharper than I intended. He blinked, taken aback, before answering, 32. My stomach churned violently. 32. That was before us. Before our marriage. Before the life she built with me. She hadn't erased her past. She had hidden it in flesh and blood. Daniel's eyes flickered as he studied my reaction. His own emotions caught between anger and sorrow. "I didn't come here to hurt you," he said again, softer this time. "I just need to know why she pretended I didn't exist." His voice broke slightly at the end, and for the first time I saw the child in him, abandoned, silenced, forced into shadows. The weight of his pain made my chest ache, even as resentment clawed at me for being the last to know. I gripped the letter tighter, the paper crumpling in my hand. "She told me nothing," I admitted, the words tearing out of me like a confession. "Not a single word. For 30 years, she let me live beside her in ignorance." My voice rose, louder than I intended, shaking with betrayal. Daniel didn't flinch. He only nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer all along. We stood in silence, 2 men bound by one woman's secrets, staring at each other as though we were reflections in a fractured mirror. My mind replayed her smile, her laughter, every tender moment we had shared. And now, all of it felt poisoned. Was she ever truly mine? Or had she always been divided between 2 worlds, 2 families, 2 lives she could never reconcile? Daniel finally reached into his jacket pocket and pulled something out, a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges. "This was her letter to me," he said, his voice steady but trembling beneath the surface. He held it out to me, his hand lingering in the air. I hesitated, my fingers twitching at my side. The idea of touching it, of seeing her handwriting addressed to someone else, made bile rise in my throat, but I also couldn't turn away. I took it, slowly, cautiously, like it might burn me. The paper was cold, damp from the rain. I unfolded it, my eyes scanning the familiar slant of her writing. The words swam in the dim light, but one sentence leapt out, searing itself into me. "You must find him when I am gone. He carries what belongs to you both." My vision blurred, my knees buckling again. Carries what belongs to us both? What did that mean? I looked up sharply at Daniel, my pulse racing. "What is it you're supposed to carry?" I demanded, the edge of panic sharpening my voice. He lowered his gaze, his jaw clenching. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, in a tone that made my blood run cold, he whispered, "It's not just me she left behind." My skin prickled, every nerve on fire. The hallway seemed to shrink, pressing me into corners I couldn't escape. "What are you saying?" I asked, though my voice shook so badly it was barely audible. Daniel lifted his eyes to meet mine, and in them I saw both the truth and the devastation it carried. "She had more than one secret," he said quietly. "And tonight, you're going to meet another." Before I could respond, before I could demand an explanation, a shadow moved on the street beyond him. Another figure stepped into the glow of the porch light, face hidden beneath a hood. Daniel turned, his expression tightening. My grip on the doorframe faltered as fear surged through me. The stranger took one step forward, the gravel crunching beneath their shoes. And then, in a voice that was low, chilling, and unmistakably familiar, they called out my name. My entire body went cold. The sound of my name cut through the night like a blade. My knees nearly gave out, and I clung to the doorframe for balance. The voice wasn't Daniel's. It was deeper, rougher, but laced with a strange familiarity that made my skin crawl. The hooded figure stepped closer, rain dripping from their cloak, their shoes grinding against the gravel. Daniel stiffened, his body angled slightly as if ready to shield himself. I couldn't breathe. The porch light flickered, throwing shadows across the stranger's face, until, finally, they lifted the hood. A man, older than Daniel but younger than me, stared back at me with eyes that mirrored hers. My wife's eyes again, the same stormy gray that had once looked at me with love. My chest tightened as the truth bled into my mind. This wasn't coincidence. This was another piece of her hidden world. "You know me," the man said firmly, though I shook my head, my mouth dry. His gaze was sharp, almost accusing, as if my ignorance was an insult. "I've been waiting for this night for years," he continued, his lips curling with bitterness. Daniel turned toward him, his expression flickering with recognition. Though faint, my heart thundered so violently I thought I might collapse right there on the doorstep. "I don't know who you are," I rasped, my voice cracking under the weight of my own denial. But deep down, something in me knew. The resemblance was undeniable. The tilt of his chin, the way his shoulders squared, even the subtle smirk that reminded me of moments I had once shared with her. "Stop pretending," the man spat. "She wrote about you. She told me everything before she left." My stomach lurched violently. Daniel glanced between us, his brows furrowed. "Who are you?" he asked cautiously, but the man didn't break eye contact with me. Instead, he stepped fully into the light, his presence filling the porch. "My name is Samuel," he said. And she was my mother too. The air drained from my lungs, replaced with fire. My legs trembled uncontrollably, the letter in my hand slipping to the floor. The words shattered me. Samuel. Another son. Another secret she had carried in silence. My throat tightened as rage, confusion, and grief tangled inside me. "This isn't possible," I muttered, shaking my head violently, but my denial sounded weak even to my own ears. Samuel smirked, but it was bitter, broken. "She lied to you. She lied to all of us. But she didn't lie about me." Daniel's mouth fell open slightly, his eyes wide. "Wait," he whispered. "You're saying we're brothers?" Samuel scoffed, his shoulders lifting in a tense shrug. "Half-brothers, if you can call it that. She left me in the shadows, just like she left you. Except she gave you a name. She gave you something. She gave me nothing." His voice cracked on the last word, a tremor betraying the pain beneath the anger. I sank onto the bench again, pressing my palms into my eyes as if I could erase the nightmare. But their voices were real, their presence undeniable. My wife had built an entire family outside the walls of our home, and she had buried them under years of silence. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever imagined. I had been a husband, but never her whole truth. Samuel crouched slightly, his face closer to mine, forcing me to meet his eyes. "She told me you would resist, that you'd deny it until the proof was shoved into your hands." His gaze flicked to the letter at my feet. "You already found it, didn't you?" My chest tightened as I nodded faintly, unable to form words. The photographs, the word ours, the letter. It was all connected. And yet, I still couldn't grasp the full picture. Daniel folded his arms, his jaw tight. "What do you want, Samuel?" he asked. His tone carried both caution and suspicion, as though he already feared the answer. Samuel straightened, his shoulders broad under the wet fabric of his coat. He looked between us, his eyes narrowing. "I want what she promised me," he said coldly, "and I want to know why she gave more to you than she ever gave to me." The words sent a chill crawling down my spine. Promised? My wife? Making promises in the shadows to children I never knew existed? My hands trembled as I picked up the fallen letter, but my vision blurred. "She left you something?" I asked, my voice cracking. Samuel's lips curled into a cruel half-smile. "She left me everything she couldn't bear to face. And now, she's left you to deal with it." The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the roof like an impatient heartbeat. Daniel stepped closer to me, his expression tightening with unease. "We need to know what this means," he said firmly. Both of us. Because if she left him something too, then none of this is over. His words were steady, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his fear. My hands clenched around the letter, crumpling it further. I stared at Samuel, the night air sharp against my skin. "Tell me what you know," I demanded, my voice raw. His smile vanished, replaced by something darker, heavier. He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, similar to the one I had found upstairs. My stomach twisted violently at the sight. He held it up, letting the porch light reflect off the damp paper. "She left me this," he said. "And inside, there's a truth that will break you." My breath caught, the world spinning around me. "Show me," I whispered, but Samuel only tucked the envelope back into his coat. "Not yet," he said firmly. "You're not ready. Neither of you are." His eyes flicked between me and Daniel, his lips curling as if he relished the power of withholding. The tension on the porch thickened, suffocating. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples. Daniel stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "Stop playing games," he snapped. "We deserve to know. If she lied to all of us, then we at least deserve the truth." His voice trembled with both fury and desperation. Samuel tilted his head, studying him with a detached curiosity. "Truth," he murmured. "The truth isn't something you want. The truth is something that destroys." I clutched my chest, gasping for air. The storm outside seemed to seep into me, thunder rumbling in the distance like a warning. I wanted to scream, to tear the night apart until the lies unraveled. But instead, I sat frozen, trapped between two men who carried pieces of the woman I thought I had known. My wife, my betrayer, my stranger. Samuel finally stepped closer, his shadow looming over me. His voice lowered, each word dripping with venom. He didn't just leave behind secrets. She left behind debts. And those debts are now yours to carry. My heart skipped violently, dread flooding my veins. Debts? What kind of debts? Financial? Emotional? Or something darker? Something unspeakable? Daniel clenched his fists, his body taut with tension. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. Samuel's eyes flickered with something unreadable, a mix of anger and sorrow. "You'll see soon enough," he whispered, "because the past has a way of coming back, and it never knocks politely." The silence that followed was unbearable, broken only by the pounding of rain. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but my throat had closed completely. Samuel turned slightly, his gaze shifting past me into the house. His lips parted, and for the first time that night, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. "Did you leave that door open upstairs?" he asked suddenly, his voice sharper now. My heart lurched violently as I whipped around toward the staircase. The shadows stretched long across the hall, but something was wrong. The faint light from the locked room, the room I had opened, was glowing brighter, spilling into the hallway like a warning. My body went rigid. I knew I had shut that door. I knew it had been closed. And yet, now it stood ajar, a thin strip of light cutting through the darkness. Samuel and Daniel both turned to look, their expressions hardening. My chest heaved, my breath shallow and ragged. Before I could move, before I could speak, a sound drifted down the stairs. Soft, unearthly, a lullaby, sung in her voice. And I realized with horror, we weren't alone in the house. The melody floated down the stairs, delicate and haunting, like it had slipped through time itself. My wife's voice, the same tone that used to soothe me at night, that once lulled our children to sleep. But she was gone, buried, her coffin sealed beneath the earth. My blood ran cold, my hands trembling as the sound wound itself around my chest, squeezing until I could barely breathe. Daniel's eyes widened, his mouth parting in disbelief. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Though the question was pointless, the lullaby filled every corner of the house, sweet but twisted now, like a memory poisoned by lies. Samuel's face hardened, his jaw clenching as though he recognized it too. The three of us stood frozen on the porch, listening to the impossible. I stumbled backward into the hallway, my heart pounding so violently I thought it might burst. The sound grew louder the closer I moved to the stairs, the notes curling down like smoke from a fire above. My legs shook, but I couldn't stop. Every step pulled me deeper into a nightmare I couldn't escape. Behind me, Daniel and Samuel followed, their footsteps cautious but steady. The stairs creaked beneath our weight, the wood groaning as though it resented us trespassing into her secrets. My hand slid along the railing slick with sweat, my knuckles aching from the grip. The lullaby grew clearer, each word now distinct, each note sharper. My wife's voice, singing the same tune she once sang to our children. But there was a change. A verse I had never heard before, unfamiliar and chilling. Daniel whispered behind me, his voice trembling. "It's the same song she used to hum when I was little." His words cut through me like glass. She had sung to him too. The intimate tenderness I thought was ours alone had been shared with another child, another life. I clenched my jaw, anger flaring through my fear. But Samuel's face went pale, his eyes darting up the stairs. "Not just him," he muttered. "She sang it to me, too." I froze mid-step, my stomach twisting violently. The song had bound us all, hidden in different homes, whispered into different nights. She had carried the same melody across her secret lives, stitching us together without ever letting us meet. My wife had used love like a weapon, and now her ghost, or whatever lingered, was forcing us to face it. We reached the top of the stairs. The hallway stretched before us, the faint light spilling from the room I had sworn I'd closed. My breath caught as the song grew louder, almost deafening now, pressing against my skull until I wanted to scream. The door stood wide open, the glow inside spilling like a wound across the floorboards. Samuel pushed past me, his shoulders squared as if he could fight whatever waited inside. Daniel hesitated, his hand hovering near the wall for support. I felt trapped between them, suffocated by the truth that had already begun to unravel us. Together, we stepped toward the room, the air growing colder with every inch. The moment we crossed the threshold, the lullaby stopped. Silence crashed down around us, so heavy it felt alive. The dust hung suspended in the air, shimmering in the pale glow of the single lamp left burning on the table. The trunk still lay open, its contents scattered across the floor where I had left them. But something new sat on the table. A box, small, wooden, its surface polished, unlike the rest of the decayed furniture. My heart slammed against my ribs. I was certain it hadn't been there before. Samuel's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, his hand hovering just above the lid. "This wasn't here earlier," he muttered. Daniel swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room, as if expecting her ghost to emerge from the shadows. I forced myself forward, my legs heavy, my breath ragged. The box was engraved with a symbol I didn't recognize, 2 interlocking circles, one slightly broken at the edge. My fingers trembled as I reached out, brushing the smooth wood. The chill that shot up my arm made me snatch my hand back instantly. "Don't touch it," I gasped, though I couldn't explain why. Samuel ignored me. His jaw tightened, and with one sharp motion he flipped open the lid. A gasp escaped Daniel's lips, my own breath hitching in my throat. Inside lay a bundle of old letters, tied with a strip of red ribbon. But on top of them, carefully placed, was a small silver key. Its surface glistened under the dim light, pristine as though it had never been touched. Daniel reached for the letters, but Samuel's hand shot out, gripping his wrist tightly. "Not yet," he said, his voice low and edged with warning. "She left these for a reason, and if we open them too soon, we might regret it." Daniel jerked his hand back, glaring at him, but didn't argue. I stared at the key, my pulse roaring in my ears. Another lock, another secret. I picked up the key with trembling fingers, its weight impossibly heavy for something so small. "Where does this lead?" I asked, my voice a whisper. Neither of them answered. Instead, the 3 of us stood in suffocating silence, staring at the object like it might shatter our lives even further. The air grew colder, the light flickering above us. Then, from somewhere deep inside the house, we heard it. A knock. Slow, heavy, rhythmic, 3 times against wood. The sound echoed through the walls, rattling the frames on the hallway. Daniel's eyes widened in terror. Samuel's lips pressed into a thin line. My heart seized. "It came from the basement," Daniel whispered, his voice trembling so badly it barely carried. Samuel's gaze darkened, his fists clenching at his sides. "That's where the key belongs," he muttered. My body went rigid, the blood draining from my face. The basement, the one place even I had avoided, filled with decades of dust and silence. The knock came again, louder this time, shaking the floor beneath us. My stomach twisted violently as dread coiled through me. Someone, or something, was waiting for us below. I clutched the key so tightly it cut into my palm, the sting grounding me in the horror. Daniel stepped toward me, his voice low and urgent. "We need to go down there," he said. Samuel nodded, his jaw set. I shook my head, panic clawing at my throat. "No, we shouldn't," I pleaded. But the decision was no longer mine. The house had already chosen for us. The lullaby returned then, faint but unmistakable, drifting up from beneath the floorboards. Softer now, like a whisper rising from the earth. Samuel's eyes flashed with grim certainty. Daniel's face pale but resolute. I felt my legs buckle, my world crumbling. I realized in that moment the key wasn't just to a lock. It was to the truth she had buried where none of us were meant to find it. And now, it was calling us down into the dark. The knock came a third time, louder than before. And this time, it was followed by a voice I thought I would never hear again. My wife's voice. She called my name. Her voice wrapped around me like chains, dragging me back into memories I had tried to bury. The way she called my name, tender but sharp at the edges, was exactly as it had sounded when she was alive. My knees went weak, and I pressed my hand against the wall for balance, the key digging into my palm like a brand. Daniel and Samuel froze beside me, their faces pale in the flickering light. None of us dared breathe. The house groaned with the weight of the silence that followed. I prayed I had imagined it, that grief was playing tricks on my mind. But Daniel looked at me with wide eyes, whispering, "You heard her too." Samuel's jaw clenched, the muscle twitching under his skin. "She's gone," he muttered, though his voice cracked, as if he didn't believe it himself. Yet the echo of her voice lingered, undeniable, alive. The key in my hand grew heavier, pulling me down like gravity itself wanted me to obey. The basement door was at the end of the hallway downstairs, a place I rarely entered in all our years together. I remembered her warnings whenever I got too close. "Don't go down there. It's not safe. Promise me you'll stay out." I had always obeyed, thinking she feared the dust, the mold, the broken steps. Now I knew better. Daniel glanced toward the stairs, then back at me. "If she left us the key, she wanted us to go down there," he said, his voice unsteady but resolute. Samuel scoffed bitterly, folding his arms across his chest. "Or she wanted us to suffer the way she did. Don't you see? Every step we take, we're just following her game." His words hung heavy, but even he didn't move away. The pull of the basement was undeniable. I forced myself to nod, though fear coiled tight in my stomach. "We have to," I whispered. My voice sounded foreign, hollow, but it was the truth. We couldn't turn back now. With trembling legs, I led the way down the stairs again, each step echoing louder than the last. The house seemed to hold its breath, the air growing colder, pressing into our skin like icy fingers. At the bottom of the staircase, the hallway stretched before us, the basement door looming at the end like a mouth waiting to swallow us whole. The paint on it was chipped, the wood swollen with age. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear nothing else. I reached out, my hand shaking violently, and slid the small silver key into the lock. It fit perfectly. The metallic click reverberated through the hallway, sharp and final. My breath hitched, Daniel's hand tightening on my shoulder as if bracing for what was to come. Samuel stood rigid, his eyes fixed on the door, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. I turned the knob, and the hinges shrieked as the door creaked open, releasing a gust of air so cold it felt like the basement itself had been holding its breath. The stench hit us immediately. Damp earth, mildew, and something else. Something metallic, almost like blood. My stomach turned violently, bile rising in my throat. Daniel covered his mouth, his eyes watering, while Samuel's jaw hardened. "She hid something down there," Samuel said grimly, stepping closer. His voice trembled despite his defiance. We descended into the darkness, the wooden stairs groaning beneath us, threatening to collapse at any second. I gripped the railing with one hand, the key still clutched in the other, though it felt useless now. The faint light from above faded quickly, replaced by thick shadows that seemed to press against our skin. Daniel pulled out his phone and flicked on the flashlight, the beam cutting through the blackness. The basement walls were stone, slick with moisture. Cobwebs draped across the corners, and the air was heavy, suffocating. Boxes lined the walls, but unlike the dusty ones upstairs, these were newer, sturdier, locked tight with chains and padlocks. My pulse quickened. Whatever was hidden here, she had gone to great lengths to protect it. In the center of the basement stood a table. Upon it, another box, larger than the one upstairs, covered in dust but untouched by time. The symbol of two interlocking circles was carved into its surface again, only this time both were broken. The sight of it sent a shiver through me. Samuel stepped closer, his hand hovering above the lid. "This is it," he murmured. "This is what she didn't want us to find." Daniel shone the light over the table, his face pale, his hands trembling. "Open it," he urged, though his voice cracked. I shook my head instinctively. "Wait," I said, my throat dry. "We don't know what's inside. We don't know what it will do to us." My warning sounded weak, drowned by the pounding of my own heart. Samuel's eyes narrowed, his fingers twitching. Before I could stop him, Samuel gripped the lid and forced it open. The sound of the hinges tearing free echoed like a scream. Dust billowed into the air, and I covered my mouth, coughing violently. When the haze cleared, my eyes widened at what lay inside. Not letters, not photographs, but stacks of documents, neatly organized, bound with twine, and beneath them, a revolver. Daniel's breath caught, the beam of his flashlight shaking wildly. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. Samuel's expression darkened as he reached in, lifting the revolver with careful hands. The metal glinted under the light, still oiled, still functional. It wasn't just a relic, it was ready to be used. My stomach dropped as I realized my wife hadn't just hidden secrets. She had hidden weapons. I grabbed one of the bundles of documents, my fingers trembling as I tore the twine loose. Papers spilled across the table, covered in her handwriting. Names, dates, transactions. Some crossed out violently, others underlined. And at the top of one page, written in bold, desperate strokes, was my name. My blood froze. Daniel leaned over my shoulder, his eyes scanning the words. "She was keeping records," he whispered. "Money, accounts, connections." His voice broke as he looked at me. She wasn't just hiding a family. She was hiding an entire life we never knew about. My throat tightened, my vision swimming. I had thought betrayal was the worst of it. But this was darker. Samuel tucked the revolver into his coat, his face unreadable. "She was involved in something," he said flatly. "Something dangerous. And now, it's ours to clean up." His words were cold, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his fear. I stared at him, my chest heaving. "No," I croaked. "This isn't ours. It was hers. Hers alone." But even as I spoke, I knew the truth. Her past had already ensnared us. The basement door above slammed shut with a thunderous crack. All three of us jerked our heads upward, Daniel's flashlight beam shaking wildly against the ceiling. My breath seized in my lungs, the sound reverberating through the stone walls. We hadn't touched it. We hadn't closed it. And yet, we were trapped. A whisper drifted through the basement, curling around us like smoke. "You shouldn't have come here." My blood turned to ice. It was her voice again, but this time it carried no tenderness. Only warning. Only threat. Daniel grabbed my arm, his nails digging into my skin. "Tell me that's not real," he whispered, his voice breaking. But I couldn't answer. Samuel's grip tightened on the revolver, his chest rising and falling in sharp, shallow breaths. The documents rustled on the table as if stirred by invisible hands. One sheet slid free, drifting to the floor. Daniel shone the light down, and we froze. There, scrawled across the page in red ink, were 5 words. "He knows you are here." The basement filled with silence again, thick and suffocating. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My wife's secrets had led us here, but now someone else, someone alive, was watching us. And then, from the farthest corner of the basement, came the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving closer. The sound echoed off the damp stone walls, each step deliberate, steady, heavy. My breath caught in my throat, my heart slamming against my ribs as if trying to break free from my chest. Daniel's flashlight jerked toward the corner, the beam slicing through the shadows. But there was nothing there, just boxes and darkness. Still, the steps continued, coming closer, surrounding us. Samuel lifted the revolver, his hands trembling though he tried to steady them. "Show yourself!" he barked, his voice raw, echoing in the cavernous room. But no answer came. Just another step, closer, louder, pressing against our nerves until we were on the edge of collapse. My legs shook so badly I gripped the table for balance, the documents crackling beneath my palms. Daniel's flashlight flickered once, twice, then cut out completely. Darkness swallowed us whole. So complete it felt suffocating. The only sound was our ragged breathing and the relentless rhythm of the unseen steps. My wife's voice whispered again, faint and chilling, almost brushing against my ear. "You should have stayed away." I spun wildly, my throat dry, but there was no one behind me. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers slipping as panic surged through me. When the flashlight finally flicked on, the beam landed on the far wall, and my stomach dropped. A figure stood there, motionless, watching us. The outline was faint, blurred by the darkness, but it was unmistakable. A person, waiting, silent. Daniel gasped, stumbling backward, nearly tripping over a box. Samuel's grip on the revolver tightened, his knuckles white. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice echoing too loudly. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, its head tilted slightly, as though studying us. My throat burned as I forced out a broken whisper. "It can't be her. She's gone." The figure stepped forward into the light, and my blood turned to ice. It wasn't my wife, not her face, not her form. This was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, his features sharp and hard. His eyes gleamed with something I couldn't name. Malice, hunger, ownership. He smiled faintly, and the sight made my stomach twist. "Finally," he said softly, his voice smooth but chilling. "You've opened the box." The revolver shook in Samuel's hands. "Stay back," he growled, though his voice cracked. The man chuckled, low and deliberate, the sound vibrating through the basement. "That gun won't save you," he said. "It never saved her either." The words slammed into me, sharp and cruel, and I staggered backward as realization dawned. He knew my wife. He had been part of her secret life. Daniel's voice broke as he asked, "Who are you?" The man's eyes flicked toward him, then back to me, his smile widening. "Names don't matter," he replied. "What matters is what she owed. And now that she's gone, her debt falls to you." My chest tightened, my vision blurring as I gripped the edge of the table to stay upright. Debt. That word again, haunting me from Samuel's warning upstairs. Samuel raised the revolver higher, pointing it directly at the stranger's chest. "Answer him," he demanded, his tone harder now. The man tilted his head, unbothered, almost amused. "She called me when she was desperate," he said smoothly. "She promised me everything in return for silence, for protection. But promises end when graves are filled. And now, I've come to collect." The words sliced through me like knives. My wife who had shared my bed, my life, had bargained with this man, had tied herself to him in ways I couldn't comprehend. My stomach lurched, bile rising, and I whispered, "What did she promise you?" His eyes gleamed as he leaned closer into the light. "Everything," he said. "Everything you thought was yours." Daniel's hand shook violently as he gripped my arm. "We need to leave," he whispered urgently. But the basement door was shut, sealed above us. Trapped. The man's presence filled the room, his shadow stretching across the stone walls like a predator closing in. I could feel the weight of his gaze, pressing into my chest, suffocating me. Samuel took a step forward, his finger tightening on the trigger. "If you don't start talking straight, I'll—" But he never finished. The man lunged forward suddenly, impossibly fast, his hand slamming against the revolver, knocking it across the floor. The metallic clang echoed as it skittered into the darkness. Samuel stumbled back, his chest heaving. Daniel screamed, his flashlight beam swinging wildly, bouncing off the walls. I stumbled into him, nearly knocking the light from his grip. The man straightened slowly, his smile unfazed, as though the disarming had been nothing more than a game. "Guns can't stop what's already been set in motion," he murmured. His words dripped like poison, filling the basement air. I felt the key still clutched in my fist, its sharp edges cutting into my palm. The man's eyes darted to it, and for the first time, his smile faltered. His gaze sharpened, intent, focused. "Ah," he said softly. "So she gave it to you?" His tone darkened, his voice a growl now. "Then it belongs to me." Samuel lunged toward the revolver, scrambling across the floor, but the man's foot slammed down on it first. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. "Hand it over," he demanded, his calmness gone, replaced with raw fury. My hand trembled violently, the key slick with sweat, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Daniel raised his voice, desperate, shaking. "Why? What's in the basement? What does this key unlock?" The man's lips curled into something cruel, his voice low and venomous. "The truth," he said. "And trust me, boy, you don't want it." My skin prickled, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might collapse. The documents on the table fluttered suddenly, as if stirred by an unseen wind. One sheet lifted into the air, spinning before slapping against Daniel's chest. He grabbed it instinctively, his eyes scanning the words. His face went pale, his lips parting in shock. "Oh my God," he whispered. This changes everything." The man's head snapped toward him, fury flashing in his eyes. "Don't read that," he snarled, his voice booming against the stone walls. He lunged forward, but Samuel grabbed a nearby box and hurled it at him, the contents spilling across the floor. The distraction was enough to pull him back, his rage now burning hot and violent. I staggered closer to Daniel, my eyes darting to the paper in his hands. My pulse roared in my ears as I saw the heading scrawled across it in her handwriting, "The Blood Agreement." My knees buckled, my chest tightening until I could barely draw air. What had she done? What had she signed us into? The man roared, his hand slamming against the table, rattling the revolver beneath his boot. "That paper doesn't belong to you," he bellowed, his voice shaking the walls. Daniel stumbled back, clutching the document like it was life itself. Samuel's eyes burned with fury as he shoved me behind him, his fists clenched. The basement light flickered violently, shadows jerking across the walls like monsters set free. The man's gaze shifted between us, his teeth bared. "If you don't give me that key and that paper right now," he growled, "I'll make sure none of you leave this basement alive." His words dripped with certainty, with promise. My hands shook uncontrollably as I clutched the key, my body trembling with fear and rage. Daniel's breathing came in short, sharp bursts, his eyes darting between me and Samuel. The man loomed closer, his shadow stretching across us, suffocating, unrelenting. And then, from above, the unmistakable sound of the front door slamming open shook the house. Heavy footsteps thundered across the floorboards above us. More than one, many. The man froze, his eyes narrowing, his lips parted, and in a low growl he said the words that froze my blood. "They've found us." The footsteps above shook the ceiling, dust raining down onto our heads like ash from a collapsing world. My heart slammed so violently against my chest that I could barely hear my own breath. Daniel's flashlight beam wavered wildly, swinging across the stone walls, catching only fragments of shadows. Samuel's jaw tightened, his fists clenched as though ready to fight. The man before us, our tormentor, smiled faintly, like he had been waiting for this very moment. "Who are they?" Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. The man tilted his head, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Collectors," he said softly. "The ones she owed." The words cut through the air like glass, and my stomach twisted violently. Collectors. Debts. Promises she could never keep. Every secret she carried was now crashing down on us, heavy as the ceiling itself. The footsteps grew louder, multiplying. Whoever was in the house wasn't trying to be discreet. They wanted us to know they were here. They wanted us to feel trapped. The basement door rattled violently, as if someone had slammed against it. Daniel let out a strangled cry, clutching the paper tighter to his chest. Samuel bent quickly, scrambling for the revolver, but the man pressed his foot harder onto it, smirking as if savoring our desperation. "You brought them here," Samuel snarled, his voice raw with fury. The man shook his head slowly, savoring the chaos. "No," he murmured. "They always knew where to find me, where to find her." His words sent a chill spiraling down my spine. This wasn't a random intrusion. This was inevitable. Her secrets had always been ticking bombs, and tonight they were finally exploding. The basement door upstairs groaned, splintering under the pressure of the assault. My pulse roared in my ears, my body trembling uncontrollably. I gripped the key so tightly it dug into my skin, sharp enough to draw blood. Samuel's eyes darted to it, then to the documents scattered across the table. "We need to hide it," he hissed. "The key, the papers, before they come down." But the man's smile widened, his teeth glinting under the flickering light. "Hide them?" he asked mockingly. "Do you think you can hide what she already sold?" His voice dripped with venom, his gaze fixed on me. My throat tightened as the weight of his words sank in. Sold. My wife had bartered something, maybe even us. Daniel's voice cracked as he clutched the page tighter. "What's in this agreement?" he demanded. "What did she give them?" The man's eyes narrowed, his expression darkening. "Everything," he said flatly. "Her life, her children, her legacy, and now, her silence." The words left me cold, my knees buckling. Children. Did he mean Daniel and Samuel? Or all of us? The basement door slammed open upstairs with a deafening crack. The sound of heavy boots thundered against the wooden floor, moving closer, methodical. Daniel whimpered, pressing himself against the wall. Samuel finally lunged at the revolver, knocking the man's leg aside, grabbing the weapon with both hands. He pointed it directly at the stranger's chest, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Back away!" Samuel shouted, his voice shaking but strong enough to cut through the noise. The man lifted his hands slowly, his smile never fading. "Do you think they'll spare you if you shoot me?" he asked, his tone calm, mocking. "No bullet can erase a contract written in blood." My stomach churned violently, my head spinning. Blood. The words from the page. The blood agreement. The first figure appeared at the top of the basement stairs. A tall silhouette, backlit by the faint glow from the hallway. Another followed, then another. At least 4, their shadows stretching down the stairs, growing larger with each step. My breath caught, the key slick with sweat in my palm. The air grew heavy, charged, suffocating. Daniel clutched my arm, his nails digging into my skin. "We have to run," he whispered, his voice frantic. But there was nowhere to run. The stone walls closed us in, the stairs now filled with advancing strangers. Samuel held the revolver steady, his jaw clenched, his body taut like a spring ready to snap. The man in front of us laughed softly, the sound chilling. "Go ahead," he said, nodding toward the intruders. "See what happens when you try to fight them. She tried once. That's why she gave me the box." His words stung like acid, and for a moment I saw her face, desperate, terrified, pleading with someone in the shadows. She hadn't just hidden secrets. She had bargained with devils, and we were about to pay the price. The first intruder stepped fully into view. A mask covered his face, black and expressionless, reflecting the beam of Daniel's trembling flashlight. His hands were gloved, one gripping a crowbar, the other gesturing silently to the men behind him. They moved like soldiers, coordinated, without a single wasted motion. My blood turned to ice. Samuel raised the revolver higher, his finger tightening. "Don't come closer!" he shouted, his voice cracking. The masked man paused, tilting his head, as though amused. Then, without warning, he stepped forward again, unflinching. The sound of boots on stone echoed, relentless, drowning out the pounding of my heart. The papers on the table fluttered violently, as though caught in a sudden gust of wind, though no air stirred the basement. One sheet tore free, swirling upward before landing against the intruder's chest. He glanced at it briefly, then crumpled it in his fist, tossing it aside like trash. My stomach twisted. He knew exactly what it was, and it meant nothing to him. Daniel cried out, his voice breaking. "Please, just tell us what you want." The masked man stopped, tilting his head again. For a long moment, silence filled the basement, thick and suffocating. Then, In a voice muffled but deep, he spoke a single word. Her. My chest seized, my knees buckling. He couldn't mean her. She was dead, buried, gone. And yet his demand was clear. Samuel's grip on the revolver faltered, confusion flashing across his face. "She's gone!" he snapped. "You can't have her!" The masked man chuckled darkly, the sound distorted behind the fabric. "Then we'll take what she left," he said. His gaze shifted, slowly, toward me. My stomach dropped. My wife had promised them something, and it was me. The other intruders descended the stairs, their boots thundering against the wood. Samuel pointed the revolver at the leader, his hand shaking violently. Daniel pressed against the wall, clutching the paper to his chest like a shield. I stood frozen, the key biting into my palm, my breath shallow, my vision swimming. The stranger, the man who had spoken of debts, stepped back, letting the intruders take his place. The leader raised his hand, signaling the others. They spread out, forming a line across the basement floor. Their masks gleamed under the dim light, faceless, merciless. Samuel's chest heaved as he shouted, "Stay back!" But his voice cracked, betraying his fear. The leader tilted his head, then slowly extended his hand toward me, palm open, waiting. My throat tightened as I clutched the key to my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to give it up, to end this nightmare. But some part of me, small and stubborn, knew that key was the only thread tying me to the truth, to her truth. My wife's voice whispered again, faint and urgent, curling around my ear. "Don't let them have it." The leader took another step forward, his hand still outstretched. Samuel's finger tightened on the trigger, sweat dripping down his face. Daniel clung to me, whispering frantic prayers under his breath. My body shook, my vision blurring, my breath ragged. And then, without warning, the basement lights cut out entirely. Darkness swallowed us whole. The last thing I saw was the gleam of the leader's mask lunging toward me. The darkness was absolute, thick and suffocating, as though the basement itself had swallowed us whole. I couldn't even see my own hand clutching the key, only feel its sharp edges digging into my palm. My ears strained for sound, and what came was worse than silence. Frantic breathing, boots scraping stone, the shuffle of bodies moving closer. Someone whispered my name in the dark. I didn't know if it was Daniel, Samuel, or her. Panic clawed at me. I staggered back, my shoulders colliding with the damp wall. The cold stone pressed into my skin, grounding me only slightly. Daniel screamed somewhere to my left, the cry of a terrified child in a grown man's body. Samuel shouted, his voice raw, demanding answers, but it was drowned out by the heavy shuffle of masked men closing in. The darkness turned us all into prey. A single light flickered to life, Daniel's phone. Its small beam cut across the chaos, catching only fragments. Samuel, wild-eyed, pointing the revolver into the shadows. The masked intruders closing in, their movements steady and merciless. And the man, the one who had spoken of debts, standing in the corner, smiling as though he had orchestrated it all. The sight made my stomach twist with rage. "Stay close to me," Samuel barked, grabbing my arm. His grip was bruising, but it anchored me, pulled me out of the fog of panic. Daniel scrambled toward us, clutching the crumpled page to his chest, his phone shaking so badly the light quivered across the walls. The intruders didn't flinch. They advanced like hunters circling their prey. My pulse thundered in my ears. The leader stepped into the thin beam of light. His mask gleamed, expressionless, catching the reflection of our fear. He raised his gloved hand again, palm open, silently demanding the key. I tightened my grip until my knuckles screamed. My wife's voice still echoed in my head, sharp and commanding. "Don't let them have it." My chest ached, torn between survival and loyalty to a woman who had betrayed me. Samuel lifted the revolver with both hands, aiming at the leader's chest. His voice shook, but carried a fierce edge. "One more step, and I'll kill you." The leader paused, tilting his head. The silence stretched long enough to make the air unbearable. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand and took another deliberate step forward. Samuel's finger twitched, but he didn't fire. The tension snapped like a wire about to break. The man in the corner laughed softly. the sound carrying through the room like poison. "He won't shoot," he murmured. "She raised him to be weak, just like she raised all of you to serve." His words cut deeper than any blade, stirring anger in my chest, even as fear smothered me. Daniel's face twisted, tears streaking down his cheeks. "Stop talking about her!" he screamed, his voice cracking. The intruders spread out, their boots scraping against the stone floor. They were boxing us in, closing the circle. The leader's gaze never left me, never left the key clenched in my trembling hand. My knees shook so violently I thought they would give out. Samuel's breathing turned ragged, his arms quivering as he tried to steady the revolver. Daniel pressed against me, his phone light flickering dangerously. And then it happened. The revolver fired. The blast ripped through the basement, deafening, filling the air with smoke and the sharp stench of gunpowder. Daniel shrieked, dropping his phone, the light tumbling to the floor. For a brief second, the room was illuminated by the muzzle flash, the leader's mask, untouched, unflinching. The bullet had missed. My stomach dropped in horror. Darkness reclaimed us. Daniel scrambled for his phone, his sobs filling the air. Samuel cursed violently, fumbling with the revolver, his voice breaking under panic. And then, in the pitch black, the intruders moved, fast, silent, a rush of bodies closing in. I stumbled backward, my shoulder slamming into the stone wall, pain shooting through me. The key nearly slipped from my grip. Hands grabbed me, rough, gloved, pulling me forward. I screamed, thrashing, but my strength was nothing compared to theirs. The documents scattered, torn from the table, rustling under boots. Daniel's light flickered back on for a second, showing me Samuel fighting. Wild and desperate, the revolver ripped from his hand. Then the beam snapped off again, swallowed by the dark. A voice hissed against my ear, low and venomous. "Give it to me!" The demand slithered into my bones, freezing me. I twisted, trying to break free, but the grip only tightened. The key dug deeper into my palm, the only weapon I had left. My mind screamed at me to hold on, to fight, even as fear drowned every thought. Suddenly, Samuel's voice roared through the darkness. "Run!" His command was sharp, desperate, filled with something I hadn't heard before. Sacrifice. I shoved myself forward with all the strength I had, breaking the grip for just a second. Daniel's hand found mine, trembling, pulling me through the chaos. The key burned in my palm, a lifeline I couldn't let go of. We stumbled blindly, crashing into boxes, slipping on damp stone. The intruder's footsteps thundered behind us, relentless, closing in. Samuel's voice echoed again, cursing, fighting, the crack of fists against flesh. My heart splintered as realization hit me. He wasn't coming with us. He was holding them back. My legs burned as I forced myself onward, dragging Daniel with me. The beam of light flared suddenly. Daniel's phone, cracked, but still glowing faintly. It landed against the far wall, illuminating something we hadn't seen before. A door, small, rusted, half hidden behind stacked crates. My breath caught. The key pulsed in my palm as though it belonged there, as though it had been waiting for this moment. We lunged toward it, shoving crates aside, the wood splintering under our frantic hands. The door groaned as I forced the key into the lock, the metal stiff with years of disuse. Behind us, the intruders roared, their footsteps crashing closer. Daniel sobbed, pushing against me, urging me to hurry. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the key. The lock gave way with a metallic snap. I yanked the door open, the hinges screeching, revealing a narrow passage plunging into deeper darkness. The stench of earth and rot poured out, heavy and suffocating. Daniel gagged, covering his mouth, but his eyes glistened with desperate hope. "Go!" he cried, his voice breaking. "Please, just go!" I shoved him through first, his body stumbling into the narrow space. I followed, clutching the key, pulling the door behind us. The last thing I saw before it slammed shut was Samuel, surrounded by masked men, his face twisted in rage and defiance, my throat closed, my heart splintering. Then the darkness swallowed us. The passage was suffocating, the walls so tight we had to hunch and crawl. The earth pressed close, damp and cold, the air heavy with the smell of decay. Daniel's sobs echoed against the dirt, mingling with my own ragged breaths. The sounds of pursuit faded behind us, muffled by the door, but her voice followed, whispering low, almost tender. "Keep going. You're almost there." I pressed forward, my knees scraping against stone. The key clenched so tightly in my fist my hand bled. Daniel crawled just ahead of me, his body trembling with fear. My heart pounded, each beat echoing like a drum in the confined space. I didn't know where the passage led, or if it would save us, but there was no turning back. The passage narrowed further, forcing us to crawl on our bellies, clawing through damp soil. My lungs burned, my arms ached, but I pushed on. Daniel's voice trembled in the dark. "Where does this go?" he whispered, but I had no answer. My wife had carved this path into the earth, hidden it like all her secrets. Only she had known its end. Then, suddenly, the ground shifted beneath my hand. My palm pressed against something smooth, something not of soil. I scraped away the dirt, my breath hitching. A surface revealed itself, metal, cold, and unyielding. Daniel twisted back toward me, his eyes wide in the faint glow of the key. "What is it?" he asked, his voice breaking. I brushed away the last of the soil. Symbols were etched into the metal, faint but clear. The same two interlocking circles, both broken. My pulse raced, my stomach twisting violently. Another lock, another secret buried in the earth. And as my trembling hand lifted the key toward it, a voice rose from the metal itself, low and echoing, impossible yet undeniable. "You shouldn't have come here." The voice rose from the metal like a vibration under my skin, deep and resonant, echoing through the narrow passage. Daniel whimpered, pressing his hands against his ears, his eyes wide with terror. My own breath stopped, frozen in my chest. It wasn't just sound, it was presence, as if the gate itself carried her voice, warped, amplified, warning us away. The key in my fist burned hotter, slick with blood and sweat. Daniel clutched my sleeve, trembling violently. "We can't open it," he whispered, his voice raw. "We shouldn't be here. Please, let's go back." His words cut into me, but the thought of going back to the masked intruders, to Samuel's sacrifice, was unbearable. The only way was forward, into the darkness she had left us. My wife had carved this tunnel, hidden this door. She had meant for someone to find it. I lifted the key slowly, my hand shaking so badly the metal rattled against the etched surface. The twin circles glinted faintly in the dim light, both broken, both incomplete. The whisper rose again, clearer this time, and unmistakably hers. "Once you open it, nothing will stay buried." My chest tightened, my throat closing. She wasn't begging me to stop. She was warning me of what would follow. Daniel's tears streamed down his face, his voice breaking. What if this is what they were after all along? What if this is why she made the deal? His desperation clawed at me, but something inside me stirred, a cruel, aching need to know. Decades of lies, whispers, shadows. I had lived in ignorance too long. If the truth was waiting, I had to see it, even if it destroyed me. I pressed the key into the lock. The metal resisted at first, stiff with rust, but then it slid in perfectly, as though it had been waiting for me all these years. Daniel's sobs turned into frantic prayers, muffled by the sound of my heart hammering in my ears. I turned the key. A sharp click echoed, loud, final, reverberating through the tunnel. The gate shuddered, the earth trembling around us as dust rained from the low ceiling. The symbols pulsed faintly, glowing with a sickly light, as if the broken circles had been completed by the key's touch. Daniel cried out, covering his face, but I couldn't look away. The metal began to shift, groaning like a living thing as it pulled apart. A seam opened, spilling a cold wind into the passage. The stench hit us first. Rot, iron, something fouler than death. My stomach lurched violently, bile rising in my throat. Daniel gagged, crawling backward. But I stayed frozen, my eyes locked on the widening gap. Beyond the door was not stone, not more earth. It was hollow. A chamber carved deep beneath the house, hidden and sealed for decades. The gate groaned wider, until we could crawl through. The light from the symbols faded, plunging us into near blackness again. I clutched the key tighter, dragging Daniel forward, despite his sobs. His nails clawed at my arm, but I pulled him with me. We crossed the threshold into the chamber. The air was colder, sharper, alive with something that felt like it was watching us. Our knees scraped against stone as we crawled deeper, the silence heavy and oppressive. Then, the faint glow returned, not from our phones, but from objects scattered across the chamber floor. Candles, long extinguished, their wax hardened in strange shapes, but still faintly glowing, as if memory itself had ignited them. My pulse thundered, my skin prickling with dread. In the center of the chamber stood another box. Larger than any before, its surface covered in the same symbols, but these weren't broken. They were whole, complete, entwined. My chest seized as I realized what it meant. Whatever lay inside this box wasn't hidden. It was preserved, protected, waiting. Daniel fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, don't touch it," he begged, his voice breaking into pieces. His hands clawed at my sleeve, but I shook him off. My breath came in shallow gasps as I stepped closer, my fingers trembling. The lid was covered in dust, but the wood beneath looked almost new, untouched by time. I knelt before it, my heart pounding. My wife had left breadcrumbs, photographs, letters, lies, weapons, debts. But this was the end. The reason she had lived a double life. The reason she had locked the room. The reason men in masks had come for us. My chest heaved as I pressed my hands against the lid. The box resisted, sealed tight. I braced myself and forced it open. The wood groaned, dust billowing into the air. Daniel screamed behind me, a raw, animal sound. But I couldn't stop. The lid lifted fully, and I looked inside. My vision swam. My breath froze in my chest, and every part of me wanted to recoil. Inside were remains, bones, fragile and brittle, wrapped in faded cloth, a child's remains. My throat closed, my vision blurring with tears. My wife's voice whispered again, low and broken, carrying through the chamber. "Forgive me." Daniel collapsed, his sobs shaking his small frame. I staggered back, my body trembling, bile rising until I vomited against the stone floor. The horror pressed down on me, heavier than the earth above. My wife hadn't just hidden lives. She had hidden a death, a child we never knew, buried under lies and silence. The chamber air grew colder, the shadows stretching, pressing closer. The remains seemed to glow faintly, as though alive. I backed away, my chest heaving, but the whisper followed, echoing through the chamber walls. "It was supposed to be ours." My stomach clenched violently. The word, the same one written on the back of the photograph. Daniel lifted his tear-streaked face, his voice shaking. "She killed him, didn't she?" His question cut through me, sharp as a blade. I shook my head violently, denial spilling from my lips. No, she couldn't. But even as I spoke, the truth pressed against me. The debt, the secrecy, the lullaby sung in the dark. She hadn't been innocent. She had been running from the weight of what she had done. The sound of footsteps returned. This time, not from behind us, but from within the chamber itself. Daniel froze, his eyes wide, his lips trembling. The remains in the box shifted, the cloth crumbling as the tiny bones moved. My blood turned to ice, my body paralyzed. And then, rising from the open box, came the faint sound of a baby crying. Weak, hollow, echoing against the chamber walls. The key in my hand seared like fire. The chamber pulsed with a dim, unnatural glow. The tiny bones in the box trembling as if stirred by unseen hands. My heart pounded so violently, I thought it might rip through my chest. Daniel sobbed beside me, his face buried in his arms, whispering prayers that dissolved into the cold air. My grip on the key was iron, my palm raw and bleeding. And then, her voice rose one last time, clear and broken. "You were never meant to know." The sound carved through me like glass. For decades I had loved her, trusted her, built a life on foundations now revealed to be lies. And still, part of me longed for her voice to soothe me, to undo the truth already spilling out. The remains glowed brighter, and the shadowy figure at the edge of the chamber leaned closer, waiting. My chest constricted, my legs trembling. I had to choose. Let the lies die with her, or open the final wound. Daniel clutched my arm, his nails digging deep. Please, he begged, his voice hoarse. Don't give it to them. Don't let her sin become ours. His words tore at me, but something inside me shifted, a resolve I hadn't felt before. All these years I had lived blind, because she chose silence over trust. Now the silence was breaking. I wouldn't die, not knowing. I stepped forward, my breath ragged. The figure hissed, a sound that rattled the stones, its gloved hand reaching toward me. He is mine, it growled, its voice reverberating from every wall. My throat burned, but I forced the words out, my voice cracked and raw. No, he was ours. And now, he belongs to no one. The chamber vibrated with my defiance. I raised the key high, the glow searing my skin. Daniel screamed behind me, his voice breaking. Don't! But I drove the key straight into the heart of the box. Light exploded outward, blinding, burning. The shadow recoiled, shrieking, its voice unraveling into the air. The remains blazed with a brilliance so fierce it seared my eyes. For the first time in years, there was no whisper, no lullaby, only silence. Daniel clung to me, trembling violently, as the light consumed the chamber. The shadow thrashed, but the glow grew stronger, shredding it apart piece by piece. You can't erase blood, it roared, but its form dissolved into smoke, curling into the cracks of the stone until nothing remained. My chest heaved, my throat raw, my body trembling as I clung to the only truth left. When the light finally faded, the chamber was still. The box lay empty. No bones, no glow, no cloth, only dust, fine and gray, scattered across the wood. Daniel wept softly, his body slumping against me. I lowered the key, now blackened, twisted, its edges dulled. It had burned itself out, just like the lies it had guarded. We staggered out of the passage, crawling back through the earth until our lungs burned. The basement above was silent now, the masked men gone, the debris left behind like ghosts of the chaos. Samuel's revolver lay on the floor, but he was nowhere to be found. My chest tightened. Whether he had fallen or escaped, I didn't know. The silence was answer enough. Daniel clutched the page from the blood agreement, crumpled and torn. But now it was only ink. The words no longer glowed, no longer carried weight. Whatever curse had bound us had dissolved with the ashes of the box. I sank onto the cold basement floor, my hands covering my face, my sobs muffled in the shadows. It was over, and yet the wound inside me would never heal. I thought of her then, my wife, my betrayer, my love. I saw her smile in our early days, the warmth in her eyes, the tenderness I had believed was only mine. I thought of the locked door, of every time she had turned me away with a sharp glance, protecting secrets instead of trust. I had lived beside a stranger, and still I loved her. That was the cruelest truth of all. Daniel's hand touched mine, small, trembling, searching for comfort. "What do we do now?" he whispered, his voice so fragile it broke me all over again. I lifted my head, my face streaked with dirt and tears, my chest aching. "We live," I said hoarsely. "We live without her lies. That's all we can do." My words tasted bitter, but they were all I had left. We left the house as dawn broke, the sky painted in streaks of pale gray and red. The air was cold, sharp, but alive. The silence outside was different, not heavy, not suffocating, but freeing. Daniel walked beside me, his shoulders hunched, his eyes swollen from tears. He carried the weight of her truth too, but at least now we carried it together. I glanced back one last time. The house stood there, old and hollow, its windows like empty eyes. The locked room, the basement, the passage beneath the earth, they were all part of her now, secrets buried with her bones. My chest heaved as I turned away, tears stinging my eyes. I would never walk through those doors again. On the road, Daniel broke the silence, his voice trembling. Do you think she wanted us to find it?" His question hung in the morning air. I thought of her letter, of her trembling handwriting, "For when I am gone." My throat tightened, but I answered, yes. She wanted the truth to kill her twice. Once in life, once in death. My voice cracked under the weight of it. We walked until the house disappeared from view. The key, now blackened, still burned faintly in my pocket. A reminder, a scar. I knew I would never throw it away. It was the price of knowing. The final piece of her I would carry until my last breath, and with it came the lesson she had forced into my hands. Secrets always come to light. No matter how deeply buried, no matter how fiercely guarded, the truth finds its way through. She had spent her life running, bargaining, hiding, and in the end, all she left behind was pain. I would not repeat her mistakes. I would face the truth, no matter how much it cost me. Daniel and I stopped at the edge of the road, the world opening before us in muted colors. For the first time in what felt like years, I let myself breathe deeply, the cold air filling my lungs. I didn't know what waited for us, or if Samuel still lived, but I knew this. The cycle had ended. The past no longer owned us. I closed my eyes, hearing her voice one last time in my memory. The lullaby, soft and broken. I let it play in my mind, then let it fade into silence. My tears fell freely, but I did not stop them. They were the last I would shed for her, my love, my betrayer, my wife. When I opened my eyes, the horizon stretched before me, pale and uncertain. I took Daniel's hand, gripping it firmly, anchoring both of us in the present. "We go forward," I whispered. "Always forward." My voice was low, but steady. For the first time, I believed it. And so we walked on, leaving the house and its ghosts behind, carrying only the truth and the scars it left. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments below. Like this video and subscribe, because the next story I share will be even more unbelievable.